So hello everyone, my name is Andrea Isoni. I'm the Chief AI Officer of AI Technologies. All I do in my life, working life, is to implement AI solution for client from real projects. Sorry, there is a problem with the audio for me. Now I solve even that. So as I said, I implement AI solution for clients. A variety of clients, by the way, and guess what? Since 2 years ago, there is a demand for AI governance on top of the AI solution we deliver. The reason is obvious. There are new AI regulations coming to force. Actually, some of them, like the EU AI Act, are already coming to force. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Therefore, it's not enough to implement AI solution nowadays. You also need to have somehow an AI governance on top of it to be compliant, okay? And therefore the reason for this talk. What I'm gonna do in this talk, as you can see in this brief schedule of the talk, is first of all give an overview of the regulation and why these are impacting the AI governance, give a brief overview of the cyber technical teams of the governance, and how these different teams are putting together for creating an effective governance, into suggestion how to structure exactly a model of governance, as in the policy, the procedure, how this team refer to the policy and procedure, the role of certification, full disclosure. I'm an ISO IEEE committee member. Now, it's not necessary, I'm going to say a few times during the talk, it's not necessary to have a certification, but it will help in certain situations in certain ways. I'm going to talk about that later. And then I give you an overview what in an ideal scenario, an AI governance plus an AI project in an ideal scenario look like when everything is well done, okay? What you should aspire to. And then for those of you, which I assume quite a few, are starting in the journey, basically you're in the process to implement an AI project. Therefore, at some point, you will need some AI governance. What are the rule of thumbs? Basically, if you want a return of investment, what extra cost you should consider for the AI governance to factor it in to accurately budget the AI project you're gonna do. Yes, governance without doubt is an extra cost. Therefore, whenever you embark on an AI project, that should be considered, because at the end of the day, roughly, you should calculate the return on investment, all the costs included, which obviously is AI governance and the cybersecurity layer, which I'm going to talk about that in a moment, should be considered into that to have something that return value for money for your company. That said, I move on the various regulations. Just this is a very quick overview. There's much more to say, but in case you didn't know, the first one that is regulated, put a regulation into the markets, the European Union, the EU, taking into effect the EU AI Act in July, August last year, 2024, now is into effect, which means 2 dates. Since February last year, certain banned solution, which I'm going to talk about that, but it's basically biometric system in public venue, sentiment analysis in, public working place is banned, and other situations, we're going to talk about that in a moment, are going to be, has to be compliant and regulated by August 2026 or 2027. I'm going to reiterate that in a moment. The other ones are either on my left side, there is US and probably Israel and the UK, the so-called vertical approach. The UAI Act is a horizontal approach. It means that all industries are regulated together. Doesn't matter which industry you are, all industries are one body of law, and there is the UAI Act. The US, at federal level, I'm talking about, or Israel, or the UK, the so-called a vertical approach. It means that if there is a need of regulation, then the UK just push it down to the different authority, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Aviation Authority, the Healthcare Authority, whatever that is. If these single authorities they feel the need, there is a necessary addition of the already existing regulation they have, they should do so. Okay, so it's a vertical approach. every authority, every sector, healthcare, aviation, financial sector, they may have an additional extra regulation which is applicable only on their own sector. Yeah, pros and cons. I'm gonna talk about that in a moment, and then there are others that are just simply banning certain conditions, etc. But why is relevant? Well, it's relevant because, first of all, this kind of structure is something that you should consider anyway in any part of the world, regardless if it's UK or other, because it's based on first principle of affecting the consumer and the human life. I'm going to talk about that in a second. As you can see in this slide, this is the usual structure of the UAI Act. But again, I stress that even in the vertical approach or other regulation you will find, these kind of principles resonate even in other countries. Yeah, that's why it's important. So, unacceptable risk, as I said before, biometric scoring, social scoring, ban since February 2025. And the important bit are the one in the middle, high systematic risk or limit risk. These two tiers basically means anything related to healthcare, credit score, education, exam. They need to have what is called a tier 1 second regulation. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Or if there is limited impact, what I mean by impact, by the way, is the first principle of the UAI Act is impacting human life, a life, or any life in general. That means that everything impact your healthcare, your education, etc., is considering impacting human life, hence is high risk, hence is high regulated. If the impact on the human life is minimal, like customer service, chatbot, or things like that, or gardening AI tool for cutting the grass, or things like that, the impact on human life is minimal or not as impactful or healthcare. Therefore, the regulation, the compliance is limited too. I'm going to talk about that. Obviously, all the rest is the only regulation applicable, the already existing one, like GDPR and things like that. Yeah. Now, for those of you who are in the UK, just very quickly, I want to give you an overview what's important in the UK. Obviously, the UAI Act is not strictly enforced into the UK, but there may be a voluntary basis. I know, in fact, a few companies, especially large corporate, they want to be compliant with the UAI Act because it's a marketing reason. Yeah, you're showing, especially now, especially in the media and the general public, AI is seen a force of bad, to reducing the jobs, all the bad press that you can imagine. Having a company that implement or is compliant with strict regulation is actually good marketing for the company that is respecting the customer rights, behavior, and things like that. Again, as I said before, the UK has a vertical approach, but the vertical has an ambiguity in between, because the authority can at any given time add any extra regulation into their regulation they already have, and therefore you may end up, but it's unknown at the moment, you end up in, for example, the financial sector, a certain body of regulation that is a bit different than the health sector or the aviation sector. Therefore, if you are a technology provider, it's actually worse than having one single regulation. Yeah, because one thing is to have the same regulation and you do one compliance governance. Another thing is to do three different ones, because these three different bodies has slightly different nuances on that. So, and at the end of the day, that could add up in extra cost if these authorities are not aligned with each other. Again, we don't know at the moment. That's good to take in mind. But the bottom line is, therefore, that's why the UAI Act is important. Any company should show they is behaving as best as it can. Yeah, and therefore, if you show compliance, especially if you're using AI model that impact your client and or the final user of the system, having a good AI compliance will reduce the risk either for liability, which basically means safeguarding your return of investment and the profitability of your company, or at the very end, the the health and safety of the users that actually benefit from the solution. With that, just structure very quickly again how the AI Act is compliance regulations are, actually the implementation step you need to do. Again, for limited risk, general purpose AI, not related to, how would I say, the impact on human life, like healthcare or things like that, which is higher tier. So the limited risk regulation apply in 24 months. Again, if you need to remember a date, remember August 2026. That's the date in which you should have your compliance in place, yeah? Or if for certain aspect like toys or certain aspect of manufacturing, there will be another deadline a year later, which is August 2027, and that the difference is in what is called a document called Annex 2 of the UAI Act. If you want, I can discuss a little bit more, but enough detail for now. So, limited risk regulation, you should have generically a technical documentation available for client. Basically, what data you're using to train your AI model, or what data you're taking for the client, roughly a summary, how much data, how much data point, and especially if the solution is talking directly to client, you should label as such. Basically, the human should not have an ambiguity if he's talking to another human or he's talking to an AI. And this will be clearly and explicitly said. And obviously, all the other policies in respect of copyright or GDPR are already in place. It should be respected. Yeah, basically reinforcing that. For high risk solution, instead, again, you should look at Annex 2. But frankly, most of the solution, the deadline as we stand today is August 2026. Bear in mind, it may be the case this deadline will be postponed. There are rumors about that. It's not confirmed at the moment. Those are the deadline. August 2026 for most of the solution, or August 2027 for all the other solutions. All the requirement for the limited risk solution, as I said before, and then you have to have a model evaluation record, which basically means whatever the AI solution you got, you need to implement testing. I'm going to talk extensively about that in a moment. And if these testing fail, then you have a assessment on mitigation risk. Basically, if the test fail, you have a procedure and plan to take the system and recall it again, put it offline, secure it again, in case to avoid additional harm. Okay, these should be very well documented in what is called a policy or incident response. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Attached to that, or you should have a layer of cybersecurity measure to avoid adversarial actor, hackers, attackers, or any sort to interact with your system in a malicious way, hacking yourself or the user. This is part of the regulation. As you can see, just to note on that, if you are in the limited risk tier, it's quite light touch. Well, maybe. And one day to be compliant is an exaggeration, but look, no more than a month. If you are a big company, you should have a technical documentation, a summary of all the content of data ready for whatever the solution you're implementing. More or less, that would be enough to be compliant. Yeah, the actual cost for any organization that is in the other sector, the high risk sector, again, the principle is impacting human life. That is actually costly to implement all the record, the evaluation record, the testing, etc., the compliance and procedure. That where the costs are. Yeah. In fact, I'm gonna focus a lot on that in a moment because that's where you can implement a solution that, as best as it can, is efficient, as in it catch the risk, and at the same time make you compliant with as less money as possible spent in the company for you. Okay. Now, I'm closing with the UAI Act on this. The UAI Act, as I say before, is the most comprehensive body of law, but there are touch points that are valid in many other regulations in the world. For example, I can tell you is the California, or of course, District of Columbia, where Washington is in US. They have already regulation. They are not too dissimilar to UAI Act in principle. The difference usually is what is defined as risky or riskier application or company. Yeah. For example, in California, the risk organization AI solution they consider high risk is a solution that has been trained with more than 100 million, and it poses significant risk with the user when using it. Basically, all the ChatGPT and large language model alike, they all been trained, possibly, not all of them, by the way, with more than 100 millions. Therefore, they should be liable if there is some damage or the user, etc., for casualty up to 500 million. Yeah. Now, very quickly on China, for those of you who are interested, China has it's called vertical, but it's very similar to horizontal. What I mean by that, it regulates a single technology rather than the industries. The UI Act is across all industries, is considered horizontal. China is very similar to horizontal, but it's called vertical because only regulated AI, and there is a I would say a twist on the regulation, as in it required any AI solution to have traceability. Basically, it means whatever the output of the AI is, it should be somehow, somewhere traced back to the data point. It's more or less if you're using Google nowadays, and you will see that whatever the search term you put it on, the output, the first output from Gemini, and whatever the output they will put, there will be references, right? This reference is basically the traceability of the output they showing to you. That said, and before getting to the nitty-gritty how to implement these AI governance, I just wanted to show you why that is important. There is a perception in the market, definitely is so, the AI governance is a cost. It's unclear if they will ever deliver result, not for the company, because of course for the company is a cost, and you need to diminish the cost as much as possible, but for the general good of the population. Now, if you look at this graph, you will see that this is, by the way, talking by OECD. OECD is a non-profit or international organization. And by the way, as I said, most of these regulations across the world are somehow aligned. And what is an AI system, as a definition, is being invented and defined by OECD, and the same exact definition has been used across from UAI Act, ISO standard, UK authorities, California or Texas regulation. Everyone uses the same definition, just to show you that there is across the board alignment somehow on all these regulations. And the OECD did this AI incident monitor every day. They basically check what are the AI incident you can find in the news in which there has been allegedly somehow, or actually there's been some harm due to AI solution for cyber attack, insulting a user, whatever that else. Yeah, as you can see from the graph, there is a huge spike around November 2022. And then there is a significant decrease around August or June 2024. Now, if you look at that, these are exactly the day, November 2022, in which ChatGPT was released. And around June, July 2024 is exactly when the UI Act takes into effect. Of course, causation and correlation are two different things. I get that. In fact, I agree with that. But it's an interesting fact to observe that this thing is... at the very least, is an interesting coincidence that these two things are aligned. So that means that probably there is some effect, at least for the very naive, malicious actor, to stop using AI solution for bad purposes once the UAI Act at least take into a force. That said, let's go to the actual implementation of this solution. First of all, I wanted to show you, if you ever implement anything on AI governance, you probably have something about data governance, yeah? If you have something around data governance, the quickest and most impactful way to start your model of AI governance is to replicate whatever, the job structure you have for the data governance into the AI governance. That means if you're a data protection officer, that becomes an AI protection officer. Data custodian, it becomes an AI custodian. Data steward becomes an AI steward, and so forth, so forth. In this way, at least you have a structure, and you can refer a structure you already implemented into this new AI governance, okay? Which means whatever you were doing with the data, somehow, somewhere can be translatable into the governance of the AI system. We're going to talk in detail in a moment. And then you can start to put a policy and procedure risk assessment exactly, well, not exactly, but in a similar way you're doing in the data governance, and add specific wording related to the AI solutions. Basically, if your solution is not too technical, you can literally take the data has been ingested, which is supposed to be already regulated, taking the AI solution and add some wordings, an extra segment on the policy and procedure already please do checking the data. That should be enough, at least to start with an AI model governance, okay? Now, with that, if you want a more structured way to structure your governance, there are certification in place. Again, full disclosure, I'm a committee member of both IEEE, and why these certifications are important for what is called presumptions of conformity. Basically means that if you're showing the actual effort implementing an ISO certification or whatever the other certification, it means you really put your money where your mouth is, because this certification will cost you money. Therefore, if ever you have a data breach or an AI breach, or your user, whatever that is, that will be considered in court or whatever else, so in arbitrage, whatever unfortunate case you need to deal with, as a positive way, as you did the best you could do to avoid an harmful situation for your user, your client, etc. It's called presumption of conformity, okay? Now, to give a quick example, for our SMEs, the cost for this certification, especially for an ISO certification, is about 20-50K, plus a recurring fee around 5 to 10K per year. Certification, by the way, is valid for 3 years, and then you have a yearly fee of 5 to 10K for the next subsequent 3 years. Then you need to recertify, so 50K again on the year 4th. I stress that it's not necessary that you need to certify, but the adherence of certification will be very, very helpful for you. The majority of these costs I'm just taking to you now is when you actually certify. If you just want to adhere to the certification, basically taking the same structure but do not have an external audit that actually certify that you did what you did in your policy, procedure, etc., the cost is really talking about just downloading the policy, couple of £100, maybe £1,000 to download all the policy and procedure and the subscription to ISO, and that's your good. Yeah, the actual cost of the certification is actually the external audit. That's what it costs money. But if you don't need that, and you just want to implement the certification as a structure and as a model governance, that will cost way less than that. Okay, and may be good for you anyway. Now, our AI project with the AI governance on top will be structured correctly. As you see in this slide, there are 3 components at least that need to interact. 3 components, 3 things that need to interact with each other. One is the AI governance safety review board, which means basically is the board of your company where your executive sit, your AI protection officer is sit, and there they have a budget for your solution, including the governance. They need to understand if there is a return, because obviously if you have an AI solution, they're supposed to give a return for your company. But if you add the AI governance, they eat too much margin. There is arguing if the AI solution is good in first place. It is a fair argument to make, and needs to be made at this stage, yeah, or in this group or team of people. And then here you need to set up your setting, a behavior, basically the policy, what you want to check, and which the different metric you want to check, yeah, and the cost and the structure in play for the security compliance. I'm gonna say the first 9 now, but I'm gonna say a few times during the talk, and never enough. frankly. The most important thing you need to do when you set up an AI governance is understanding and being very aware what is the highest risk for your company. Yeah. Once you identify your highest risk in implementing an AI solution or your company, therefore, from there, you can derive all the rest. I did testing in many different roles. I'm not only testing AI, but any testing certification or even software development certification or course or class you will do, you will learn as a first principle that testing everything is a fallacy. Yeah, it's not possible to sell everything, let alone test everything in an AI system. Yeah, therefore, the only feasible way you can approach testing, any testing, by the way, so therefore also AI, is to define what's the maximum risk you're subject to or exposed to, and from there, design test, especially to mitigate the risk of your worst possible harm. Yeah, it's not possible to check everything. It's a fallacy to check everything. So it's super important that you have a strict understanding, a clear understanding of what the maximum possible harm of your AI solution will be. And from there, derive the structure, the policy, the compliance, the cybersecurity layer on top of it. I'm going to explain to you how you structure that in a moment. The second theme is once you structure it, once you understand the cost, once you understand exactly what type of risk your company is exposed to, now is the moment to actually implement it. What I mean implementing the structure of the testing, what metrics you do, the threshold. The threshold is 95%. Is it all right if only 1% of the output will be wrong? In which case it's wrong, things like that. I actually implement the solution, the bug fixing, basically the code. You're developing, testing a software solution to check your AI system, the periodicity, how often you want to test it, things like that. External to that, there is the audit team. Basically, it's an external team. When I say external, it could be interpreted in two ways. Either completely external from your organization, and that goes along the way to having a external certification, as I said before, which is the costly part of being certified. Again, it's not necessary. You can have the same structure, adhere to a standard, adhere to a certification without having the external third party stamp on your own system. And audit can be just an internal team to the company, but external to the teams I show you above. Basically, it's people that were not involved in the drafting of the policy or the drafting implementation of the test. It can be external reviewer, but internal to the company if the solution being implemented correctly, give you some feedback. Now, how would you structure all of this? As I say, the safety review board, once again, I would never stress enough, identify the maximum possible harm the AI solution could do. Once that is identified, it should it should build evaluation grid for your AI system. I'm assuming that a company may have nowadays more than, well, they will definitely start from one, but they have different AI system. This AI system should come to a grid of evaluation. It's literally like the AI system is a student, the AI student should be assessed and will be assessed according to an evaluation grid. Yeah. How you build the evaluation grid? I give you an example as in this slide. In this slide. So here I show you 3 types of evaluation grid you can build in your own company. Yeah. Again, once you identify what's the maximum risk, most important you could potentially do in your own company. Yeah. So AI classification standards that would be from A1 to D. Basically, A1 means that your AI solution is designed to be fully automated, no human intervention at all, no human in the loop, nothing like that. B1 is something in between. So yes, it's used that it has some decision-making capability, but still should be some human involved for the final check on the output of the result. D has no other input and no functionality that is impacting the software and the human in between. Now, then you have property of the AI solution. So this AI solution can be tested in many different ways, yeah. And one is interpretability, for example, is the output, the solution, how easy it is to understand. I want to check for that. Or robustness is if I slightly tune the input of the AI solution, will be the output confused or will be robust, as in it will understand no matter if I am a bit ambiguous on the input, it will be in any case a good output. Basically, this is a test of how ambiguous can be the input, but regardless the output will be in any case clear. That's robustness. Verifiability is basically to confirm how, according to the initial safety or technical requirement, your solution is actually producing an output. Because you can define a solution, then the actual implementation of a solution is a bit different than the ideal requiring you are here. You define it initially, and therefore verifiability is a metric that define how close the initial requirement are with the actual output of the solution you implement at the end. And then you have safety standards, safety compliance classification. You want your how compliance based on the actual maximum you define. How would you want to classify your solution? Would you want your solution completely fully safe, compliant to all the standard, or you want the solution not standard because, for example, the solution is just internal, it's just a proof of concept, therefore the solution is to class X because, hey, we are just testing, it's just using internally with a few people inside the company, so it's okay. It can be a not compliant safety level for the moment, okay? Once you define this evaluation grid, again, the classification standard, what is that in terms of autonomous system? Is it completely autonomous, partly autonomous, not autonomous at all? You have property classification of safety, which property you want to test and how much, and then the safety compliance, how much you want this solution to be classed as compliant to safety or not, okay? Once you have your evaluation grid, any new student, any new AI solution should be evaluated according to this grid, okay? Then once that is defined and the solution is assessed with that, there is come to the AI safety team to actually implement this test, which basically means define the metric of accuracy or make this a false positive or negative, how many sentences should be correct, how many sentences or percentage of sentences should be wrong if it's an LLM model, whatever that is, okay? And you, with that, refine formal register. Basically, by the way, you need to decide how often you want to check your solution and add formal register on. Today, I checked the testing for accuracy. Yesterday, I tested the test for safety for malicious input, things like that, and record what the test has been in percentage, according to the metrics, and things like that. And if the tests are wrong or below the threshold you set up, then you need to have an incident response, which basically means shut off the API of the solution, put it offline with an already backup model, whatever that is. But you have a fully documented procedure in place to activate, press the button when the solution failed the test, okay? And then there is the machine learning operation team that literally build and run the test every day or how often that is required, yeah? And they check the solution, they do a maintenance of the Python script to run the solution, the bug fixing, the improvement, and actually run the test and record the incidents and things like that. External to this, as I said before, there is an external audit, okay? Now, with that, you should if it's not too confusing, an idea all the different aspects of the AI governance should work in practice. And now I'm giving you a practical example just to solidify the theoretical knowledge I put in this slide, okay? Now, AI project running correctly, few examples. Actually giving you two. One is, for example, as I say in the left part of this slide, an automatic, let's say you're large manufacturer or whatever product there is, and you have different clients with sensitive data you don't want to disclose, and therefore you want your own LLM system that draft purchase contract agreement with specific data on previous buyer experience, liability on certain product, warranty on certain product you produce for the client, or things like that. And therefore, you want an automated system that produce this document automatically, with specific information of the product, the characteristic of the product, the cost, and buyer data, things like that. Another application could be, let's say you have a national archive institution, a department with a lot of old data back on the 80s and 90s, they still be useful, or you have a lot of satellite images with potential mine ores, signals, or whatever that is, You want to take all the database of information and self-labeling it, because manually labeling images or manually labeling written text is too costly. You don't have the resources, it's unfeasible, but you can build a model to self-labeling all these images or text or handwritten text, whatever that is, So you see, these are two different applications, okay? Now, in this content, as I said before, there will be the student, Your AI safety board already built an evaluation grid. All you need to do, your AI data protection officer, take this solution, the student, evaluate the student, or decide what he wants to evaluate the student on, I hope that is clear. So, for example, you can decide, hey, these solutions to be classified as B1, which means basically they should be almost an automatic output, but should be a human reviewer for the final checks, both will be like that. By the way, this is the most common thing, You don't want the output completely unchecked by a human. We always want somehow some sort of checks, human check, just in case the AI got wrong. And in terms of safety compliance, you want maybe category class 2, which basically means you want some risk reduction in place, but not the full test on everything, because probably cost you too much money to do it, which fairly reasonable to do in that way. Therefore, you decide, as you can see here, certain specific property you want to actually test. You remember here on the middle, I define some characteristic you want to test. By the way, as you can see here, is a little bit more complex than just deciding which characteristic and property you want to test on the system, because you have different, how would I say, output, different input. You maybe want to test the AI solution input, in this case, the document or the satellite images for speciality, but also the output. Or if there is in between human knowledge or human input that needs to put for each single output of that, you could test that too. So it's a little bit more complex than just testing for these properties. You may need to test this property according to the input output, or if there is a human in the loop, there are some information as well. So for example, in this case, you decide to decide to evaluate this solution for speciality input and output, not in generalization, as in you want to know if I put a document that is completely structured differently than other document before, that could be in any case labeled correctly by the sensor. How much you generalize, you want to robustness of the output. Basically, you want the solution, you want to check that the solution, if I put something very random, it will not mess up with the labeling system or things like that. And verifiability, which basically means how close it is to the requirement I specify at the beginning your output is. Therefore, once you specify that, once your AI protection officer and the safety board decide what exactly you want to check, corresponding to the maximum or the potential maximum harm that your solution could do. For example, in this solution, just to clarify, the maximum output could be the legal document that is is drafting to the client, has been checked, it goes around, they has wrong information or actually disclose sensitive information for other clients that are protected by for non-disclosure agreement or more strict agreement. Therefore, you're liable because you're breaching confidentiality or things like that, because automatically has not been checked correctly, disclose sensitive information in disclose. Therefore, your situation is liable. Yeah, your solution is liable. Therefore, you want to check this harm, because liability means cost of the company or potential lawsuit or things like that. Therefore, this potential harm should be checked in the, for example, in robustness. Yes, if the initial input are not correct, doesn't mean the automatic drafting of the document reveal information that it shouldn't reveal. It should be always robust, verifiable, hence the solution, the actual output of the final legal document doesn't disclose information in disclosed to. It's robust and verifiable. And therefore, once you define that, then is the time for your AI safety team. They actually build the test. Yeah, you build probably a specific data test to test, a Python script to actually run the test, decide how often needs to test it, build a pipeline or system that, and the records to check the system actually respect the test, and the incident response solution. Yeah, and then you have an operation team that just run the test constantly whenever necessary. How often you decided that this test should run, and the external audit. If that is clear, you should see how this system run again. So you have different solution. Each solution is like a student. The student should be assessed according to a predefined grid, evaluation grid. Use AI safety board, and then you base it on this grid. You cannot test everything, because testing everything is a fallacy. But you could test what you're supposed to have the most possible harm your AI solution could do, and therefore you decide to test the property and classify according to the system based on the the maximum harm the solution could do. Yeah, and therefore from the rest you actually implement the test and you run the operation of the test. And if you want, like an external certification, you will an external audit that check you actually did it correctly, and then you give you a presumption of conformity if in case there are unfortunate situations, if things goes wrong, you are in a legal dispute or arbitrage, whatever that is, so you can show you did the maximum you could do. Now, if that is clear, the last thing I want to do with you today is giving you I'm a little bit conscious with time, because at least I want to finish maximum in 1 hour or less. I want to give you a quick overview and guidance on what you could do to actually implement AI solution, either if you don't have any governance at all at the moment, or if you have already had a governance, for example, for cybersecurity, for quality, and you want to extend the governance you already have into AI governance. Yeah, let's start for giving you a bit of guidance on what you could do if you don't have any governance at all. Yeah, again, I say so many times, but it's so important. I will say again. First of all, understand clearly what your risk exposure procedure priorities are. So you need to know exactly what the maximum harm of the AI solution will be. Therefore, you can structure the evaluation grid and the test accordingly. Yeah. If you don't have a governance in place, please use the one available online. There are many from NIST. There are a few names you may recognize if you are in the compliance industry. If not, just take this name, search on Google. You will find a lot of templates. And by all means, yes, of course, you can use this template and use some sort of LLM such as GPT with additional information on your company draft or an initial draft. I stress initial draft or your own policy and procedure with that. Yeah. So you take this example as starting a template, you add some information on your company, and you produce an initial draft of what should be your policy and also procedure to have your own AI governance. Bear in mind that organization between 50 to 100 employees should be compliant with no more than 25 pages. In fact, if you're less than 20 employees, 10 pages, it should be enough, really. more than 200 plus employees in a company, 50, 70, 100 pages policies, because we have the complexity is there will be more people involved in using more AI solution. I'm expecting that the solution will be more nuances, sophisticated for you, things like that. But bear in mind, the more you add in this testing, in this policy and procedure, the more obviously it will cost. And will eat the margin that you should in any way calculate as a return of investment for your AI solution. Then once you're done it, so basically you define, as I said before, again, you define your evaluation grid, yeah? The top of this slide. You define your evaluation grid. Everything is clear, so whenever you have an AI solution, you can classify and decide which property you want to test it, yeah? You've done that, following some example. Yeah, and internal data of your company or whatever it is you want to risk assess for that. Then is the time to actually build the test. To actually build the test, look, if you are already tester or software tester or even software developer, they are able or they are already doing some tests for performance metering, how quick the API respond or concurrence. If you have any of these tests, they should be able to build other tests too. Yeah, you do not need an AI expert to build this kind of test. Yeah, you just need someone that know to code and know to do build test. Yeah, by all means, there are a lot of open source tools and models that can help you to achieve that. Not necessarily the paid ones. I'm not gonna pronounce name, but look, the paid ones are good, especially if you want a liability test or help. Yeah, because you don't know exactly how to build it, they may help you for you. Obviously, if you open source, is all on you, all on your shoulders. No help on any so to speak. And then you need to build an incident response. Basically, once you design the test, you decide the threshold of the test, you run the test, it goes wrong, what would you do at the moment? You need to have an automated incident response procedure to put in place and to trigger once the test goes wrong. It can be as simple as the AI API shut off. We have a backlog of other data. We can retrain it and retest it another second time to see if it's correct or not. Or we just send an email to our users and say, look, for the next 30 minutes or 1 hour, the system will be offline. Apologies, we're texting everything and we'll contact you for further information. Things like that, yeah? Everything written down, ready to be triggered when things goes wrong. Yeah, and then you have your operation teams that literally run the tests every day or how often needs to be. Yeah. It's important here is a very technical thing, but I just want to say that anyway, for those of you that will listen that today or another day, they are technical enough, implement different level of logs. If you're familiar with software or any software really, there are things called logs that basically give you information on what a different state of execution of the software is doing, what the software is doing. If somehow, somewhere, you leave some logs active, as in because there is the tendency for reducing performance, computation power, etc., to put the log off when the system goes live because it's faster, etc. But if you at least leave some logs on, it can save you significant time when things goes wrong. And if there are few logs, they shouldn't cost too much to operate every single day. So again, even here is a balance. At least give some logs on, even in live, can be helpful. Yeah. With that, let's go the guidance in case. So I give you the guidance. You have nothing at all. What to do with that? Yeah. The case is a little bit different if you already have the governance in place. What I mean by that, you have already quality governance, you're already cybersecurity compliant, you have something around this line. You're Cyber Essential Plus compliant, for example, or ISO 27001 compliant, or you have 9001 for the quality of your manufacturing site, whatever that is, yeah? So you already have some governance in place. Then again, first of all, you want to implement an AI solution, fair enough. What's the maximum risk your company is exposed to? Once you clarify that, then you have two options. If your company is enabled by AI, what I mean by that, you're taking an AI solution, possibly from third parties, and you're reusing EIs or things like that, but it's not core to your business. Yeah, you're just enabled for this solution. Then is a case for what is called integrated compliance system. It's basically a management system. It basically means whatever the AI solution, the cyber solution, cyber compliance checks you already have, you add few other tests to your own governance system. That is good enough. Yeah. It's a different case of if your company is AI first. It means that it relies for all his or most of his product and services to AI solution. In that case, our integrated system is not suggested. It could be, but it's not suggested, as in you may better have an AI compliance and management system standalone just for your AI solution. So in the first case, you're just enabled by AI, add few tests in the procedure and policy you already have, add just few tests and just few policy in your already existing system. So you're integrating that into what you already have. If you are AI first, you basically are a tech first, AI first technology company, then it's better to have an AI standalone management system with your separate policy, separate procedure, test, and everything else. Yeah. Again, what I said before is applicable to here. 200 employees, up to 25 policy, up to 25 pages of policy and procedure, 200 plus employees, 70 to 100. And again, when you implement these AI solutions, your AI safety and testing team, they can, in the case of integrated test, they can just add a few other tests in their routine tests they already have. Yeah, shouldn't be too difficult, to be honest. If you're checking, for example, for the performance of your AI system, like if for using you have an anomalies AI system, is supposed to have, or a software that is supposed to have a response in time under 0.1 second. Yeah, tenths of second. You have a testing, a performance checking that the performance time is always under these tenths of second threshold. It's not too difficult to implement another system. On top of that, they actually check the output or the test or whatever that is, or the solution or the flag, whatever that is also corresponding to a certain verifiability metric, robustness metric, etc. You just allow the few line of code or the already existing performance test, and this will count as an AI test. Yeah. Again, leverage open source, and again, you should have an incident response ready to be triggered when things go wrong. And again, as I said before, the operation team should add unit tests, as I said before, in already existing tests for performance, for example. And please leave those of you who are technical, you may not believe how helpful it is, but please leave some log active even when live. Yes, there is the technical procedure, shut off all the logs possible, but if you leave some logs actually active, it may save you a lot of time when something goes wrong to actually debug or investigate what is happening. With that, almost done. Hopefully it's been helpful so far for you, and just give you some rule of thumb when you want to implement an AI governance. Now, as you can see, first of all, I want to say something that I probably didn't say explicitly before. The most important role when you implement an AI solution is actually the role of the person that decides how much your AI solution needs to be checked. Yeah. So remember, you have AI safety review board. They actually build an evaluation grid. Yeah. Now, for any new AI solution, any new student, you need to decide what I want to test for the AI solution. And the tendency could be, I want to test everything because I want to be as safe as possible. So the more tests, the better. So I will test for everything. If you do that, unfortunately, it will cost a lot more money, because the more property, like in this example, right? I can cross all the cells here. Test generalization even for input and output, robustness if I test for the input, verifiability even for input and output. I test for everything. If I do that, then I need to implement way more tests. And guess what? That will cost way more money. hence I will erode the return of investment that was planned for this solution. Yeah. Vice versa, if the AI protection officer decided that for this specific AI solution, I will test just, let's say, generalization, or once the generalization, well, in that case, you're exposing your company to a lot of liabilities, yeah? Because if something goes wrong and you did few tests, it will be more difficult days, to debate since you did few tests. So as you can see, there is a fundamental, a crucial role on the AI protection office, or whatever analogous executive role will be, to decide how much we'll test. If you're testing too much, you're eroding too much margin on a return of investment in your solution. If you're testing too little, you're exposing yourself to liabilities, a potential, legal lawsuit for your company if something goes wrong. It's a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance between testing too much or testing too little. And therefore, why this role of AI protection officer to decide how much to test is so delicate. And with that, that will not surprise to you if I say that the more simple and easy to test the model is, the better, because the more simple and more easy to test, the less need of tests there are. Therefore, are favorable. But in practice means you shouldn't use LLM or sophisticated model. It is possible to do with simple model, because that means way more tests and more difficult tests to implement. Yeah, I think is easy to understand for you. Yeah, you will make your life easier, the testing easier, etc., etc. Yeah, do not use AI solution if it's not necessary. Second, remember, if you are in a high risk industry, healthcare, education, and others, the deadline it goes to 2026. If you want to be compliant with the AI Act, again, I said for the last time, I said quite a few times today, check and be aware of what is the worst possible harm of your AI application. From there, you can derive all the rest in terms of policy, procedure, the rest. Yeah. Be sure you have an engineer that is actually a champion. What he means by that, once you implement all the solutions, once you implement the procedure, the policy, you decide what you want to test, you have your incident response, you're running periodically your test, you should have, in any case, especially if the company is a technological company with the standalone AI governance, engineering the AI governance champions, which means whenever they are actually developing the AI solution, they also know a little bit of testing. Unfortunately, there are reasons for that. It's not a detriment for that. The AI engineer know little about testing and governance. There are reasons for that. It's not because there are no malicious leisure at all. It's just they haven't studied that. They focus on actually being a sophisticated AI solution. But if you have an AI engineer, they also know a bit of governance, he should be a champion and remind everyone else how to follow a bit of standard procedure on cybersecurity procedure in the actual implementation of the AI solution, which also simplify the governance test and checking later. Yeah. Rule of thumb on cost. Cybersecurity costs should be 5-10% of the total live operation. And if you want to have a presumption of conformity and making the best effort possible to show that you did the best you could to avoid breaches or potential harm and potential lawsuit for liabilities, things like that, consider a certification, yeah, like a 42001 in exactly the same way of 22001 with the cybersecurity certification. Again, being certified is not strictly necessary, but you can at least adhere to the certification. Basically, take the exemption and the play and follow an adherence to a certification rather than being strictly certified. Running cost, I would say, based on whatever the AI budget, to implement the AI solution has been, at 4-8% of that budget for governance, and 10% for maintenance, running all the checkings and things like that over time, yearly. And with that, it was a long discussion. Hopefully, it has been helpful. If there is any question now, I'm more than happy to answer. Otherwise, I thank you for your time. I hope it was helpful for you.